book lovers, welcome to Uncommon Reader. I'm Daniela, and in this video I'm going to talk about my latest buddy read with Alan of Big Heart Books and Classics, and the book was The Baron in the Trees by Italo Calvino. I had read this book when I was a child in school, and I didn't really remember much, so I was really happy to reconnect with this very unusual story. And reading it as an adult, it really made me capture so many different nuances I may not have caught as a young student. The first thing that struck me was that I feel like, having read Calvino's biography, this book was kind of an homage to his parents. His dad was an agronomist and his mother was a botanist. Since the book is so filled with trees descriptions, agriculture techniques, and botanical references. But before we dive into the story, here's a fun fact about Italo Calvino. So he was born in Cuba because his dad, after World War I, was sent to run an experimental agronomic station for sugarcane production. Calvino does not remember anything about his life in Cuba, and he stated himself this: "Of my birth overseas, I retain only a complicated biographical detail, a certain baggage of family memories, and a baptismal name that my mother, expecting me to grow up in a foreign land, wanted to give me so that I would not forget the homeland of my ancestors, Italy, of course, and which instead sounded quite nationalist in my homeland." In fact, the family returned to Italy in 1925. They moved back to Sanremo, where his dad was originally from. And his dad there was responsible for an experimental floriculture station. During that period, the park of the family villa, La Meridiana, was also used to carry out experimental studies on flower crops. So if you visit Sanremo, actually in Liguria, there is a walking tour of location linked to Calvino's life, his school, the downtown where he set his first novel, and also a walk through the surroundings of the villas where he lived. So you can see how I immediately thought about the fact that he was growing up surrounded by plants that could have inspired easily the story of the Baron in the Trees. So unfortunately, I don't have my copy here with me. I left it in the United States, so I'm just going to share the cover here. The Baron in the Trees was published in 1957, and it tells the story of Cosimo Piovasco di Rondò, an 18th century Italian nobleman who at age 12 rebels against his family's strict aristocratic life. After a quarrel with his dad over eating snails that he didn't want to, Cosimo climbs a tree in their estate and vows never to set foot on the ground again. And he keeps this promise for all his life. From the treetops, Cosimo builds an entire existence. Can you imagine? I will read some passages of the book with you a bit later. So he constructs shelters, hunts, reads books, philosophizes, falls in love, and even engages with Enlightenment thinkers. He becomes a local legend and a symbol of independence, communicating with the world below while physically living apart from it. I love that the novel was narrated by his younger brother, Biagio, who admires Cosimo for his principles and decides to chronicle all his life. So there are so many not quite so hidden messages in this quirky story. The topics of freedom and rebellion. So Cosimo's choice to live in the trees is a way of breaking free from the strict rules of the noble family and the society. It's really a bold statement about wanting to live life in his own terms. But even if he separates himself from the world below, he still finds ways to stay connected and make a difference for others, showing that independence doesn't have to mean isolation. In fact, he will passionately contribute to the society intellectually and morally. The story takes place in the 18th century and really reflects the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment, like reason, curiosity, and the desire to make society better. But it does so with a really playful, imaginative way. Cosimo has a really brilliant and curious mind, representing someone that can think for himself and looks for the truth beyond the rules and the expectations of society. So Cosimo lives among the trees, but he stays really connected with the human world. And I want to share some passages just to show you his intelligence. And aren't you curious to learn what happened on those trees and how did he manage to live all his life in the trees? So I'm going to share some passages of the book, sharing a little bit of technical facts about his life. So while I don't have the book, I did take photos of the passages I wanted to read and hear his brother sharing with us. He did everything in the trees. He had even found a way of roasting the game he hunted on a spit without coming down. He did it like this. He lighted a pine cone with a match and threw it to the ground in a place set up as a hearth. I had prepared it with some smooth stones. Then he dropped a bundle of sticks and branches on it and regulated the flame with a shovel and tongs attached to long poles so that he could reach the spit, which was hanging between two branches. All of this required attention because it's easy to start a fire in the woods. Not for nothing was the hearth under the oak near the waterfall, from which, in case of danger, he could draw all the water he wanted. Here's another funny one. Another problem, taking care of his needs. At first, here and there, he didn't pay attention. The world is big. He did it wherever he happened to be. You know where I'm talking about, right? Then he understood that it was nice. So on the bank of the river Merdanzo, he found an alder that stuck out at the most convenient and secluded point, with a fork in which one could sit comfortably. The Merdanzo was an obscure stream hidden amid the reeds. It had a rapid current and the neighboring towns threw their sewage in it. So the young Piovasco di Rondò lived in a civilized way, respecting the decorum of his neighbor and himself. So, as I said before, Cosimo was so involved in the community, and here's a passage Biagio tells us, because long before Masonry, Cosimo had been connected with various trade associations and confraternities, like that of San Crispino, or the shoemakers, and that of the virtuous coopers, and the righteous arms makers, and the conscientious hatters. Since he made for himself almost all the things he needed, he knew the most varied crafts and would boast memberships in many corporations, which for their parts were very happy to have among them a member from a noble family with a strange intelligence and approved disinterest. But what about his families? You know, I talked about Biagio, who narrates the story. His dad was very proud, although somehow he sort of respected the fact that his son kept his word, although he invited him a few times to return home. At first, you know, with a very angry attitude, and later on he softened. His mom was maybe more understanding, and she would look outside the window and look at him, and somehow they communicated. The fun thing is that he was also part of the family in a way, because the trees, he was moving around the trees. It wasn't just confined on a tree. So he would travel to different locations, just moving from one tree to the other. And there was a tree that was really close to his family's home. So he could also peek through the window, somehow still being connected with his mom. Yes, this book can have a little bit of the fantasy element to it that's very lighthearted and engaging and profound at the same time. So the big message here is that you can live your own life, follow your beliefs, staying, in your own bubble, but at the same time, you can be also connected to the ones you care about, or society, your community. I think every one of us need our me time without needing to feel guilty or selfish. And Calvino does this with such a lightness that doesn't mean superficiality. In fact, it means you're moving through life with what you have, accepting what comes, and trying to see the bright side of things. So it was such a pleasure to read this again. And I thank Alan for joining me in this buddy read. Don't forget to watch his video. There is a link down below in the description box. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you soon here on Uncommon Reader. In the meantime, happy reading. Ciao.